ICQ Podcast episode 362, ARDC supporting amateur radio. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 362nd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature looking at how the ARDC is supporting amateur radio. Well, as always, to keep your amateur radio show advert free, we'd like to thank our monthly and subscription donors this episode for helping us pay our way on the internet and getting our bills covered off, etc. You can do exactly what they've done by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate, and the best way I can suggest is to think of the value you got from the show, turn that into a monetary figure, and say use one of the donation options available to you to pop that our way, as all funds that we receive in help us improve the show and pay our bills, etc. So anything you can send our way is always very gratefully appreciated. Right, we're going to move on with the show, and we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank and Bill to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including Oregon student satellite launches and ham radio banned in a yacht race. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to this episode's ICQ podcast, episode 362, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Bill Barnes at the other side of the pond. Hi, Bill.
Good evening, Martin. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good evening, Bill. And Bill's call sign WC3B. Also, the other side of the pond, I have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin and everybody. Great to be here tonight.
Yeah, good to have you, Frank. And coming back to my side of the pond, Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL. Hi.
Hello, hello, hello.
No playing buzzers and bleeps for Leslie because he's not with us tonight.
Oh, hang on.
Blimey, set him off now.
I get the jingles
That's
out.
Leslie.
Yeah. And last but not least, because he didn't want to be first today, Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Very good evening. Evening, Martin. Evening, guys. Happy to be here and looking forward to another episode of the podcast.
Yeah, that should be a good one. Now, there's some interesting news stories this episode, I think, and some nice ones. Our first one, Oregon students have produced a satellite which they're going to launch next year. Great piece of work by youngsters. I really get excited talking to some of the youngsters and what they're actually doing, and wish I was sort of 40 years younger. Maybe I could have taken part in some of this, but I don't know. Frank, what do you think?
Well, thanks, Martin. This is a great story. Having been a professor for 4 decades at multiple universities, one of the things that I truly do miss, I don't miss the paperwork, but one of the things I truly do miss is working with teams of students, usually in either some of my statistics or research design classes or in my spatial analysis laboratory, where you're focused on one or more projects. And you have this group of young people. You don't ever tell them anything's hard, or certainly never tell them it's impossible, because they will always surprise you, occasionally in a way you don't expect, in a negative way, but most often they're going to surprise you at just what they're capable of doing. And that's what this story is about. We'll have the link in the show notes for the Portland State out in Oregon, their group on their small tissue box size satellite. And it's really cool. I feel for their advisor, Andrew Greenberg, who said, well, it's not supposed to catch fire in space. Great story.
Yeah, I think, it would be great to have a go at some of this. And, I think, there's just so much going on in technology nowadays. There always has been, but I think it's gone up a level. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, this one's really cool. It's the Portland State Aerospace Society at the Portland State University in Oregon, here in the States. The primary mission of this CubeSat's going to be live downlink video from lower Earth orbit that you can watch using a simple handheld ground station. Secondary payload is the flux camera, and that's looking at high altitude cirrus clouds from low Earth orbit, and that's kind of neat. But that's using a shortwave infrared camera. So I think just that interesting view they're going to get is going to be really fascinating. I think the downlinks for the UHF payload, which is going to be either CW, APRS, or 9600 baud packet, is going to be 436.625 megahertz. And the video, which is the primary mission, is going to be on 2.4 gigs, so 2421.500 megahertz. That's actually in the amateur radio band for 2.4 gigs. Yeah, tissue size box. That was the other thing too. Somebody mentioned that, and I had to look that up. It's actually a 2U CubeSat. So instead of being that 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter cube, it's a 10 by 10 by 20 centimeter cube. So that's like 4 by 4 by 8 inches roughly, for those that still use the inches. So they're packing a lot of stuff into a small package, but at last there's no transponders, so it will not be another repeater in the sky. But I still think it'll be neat to download the live video just to see how does the tops of the clouds look from low Earth orbit.
Bill, let me chime in on that. I put a few bucks into a balloon launch for a middle school here where I live. And that was the best thing that I got back for my $500, Bill, was actual photographs that technically I owned from a intellectual property point of view of what do the tops look like, and they're wonderful.
You have the coolest hobbies, Frank.
Well, I think it'll be great, and say for us amateurs, we can still be able to monitor it as it goes over and get its telemetry and even get the pictures of it. So it's a win-win. Martin, what's your thoughts?
I love the idea of being able to download pictures, but I think you can do that, to some extent with the weather satellites. That I've not actually got around to trying that yet. Initially, I thought, well, no transponder. I can't use. Just not interested in this. But then I thought I started reading more. We mentioned about about looking at clouds from low Earth orbit. I mean, the other alternative, if you've got a bit more money to spend, is of course to reach out to the Blue Origin team and Jeff Bezos. I'm sure they'll be happy to help you see the clouds from above. But otherwise, a flux camera. It's going to travel in time. No, that's a flux capacitor. I'm loving this though. Students doing this. What would you even study at university to get involved in this sort of stuff? There's got to be some level of technology. Is there space exploration? Is it weather? I would love to know. It's certainly something. I mean, there's a downlink on 436 and pictures at 2.4 gigs. You might struggle to pick up 2.4 gigs in a densely populated area with lots of Wi-Fi stuff around you, but certainly be interested to know more and see if it's possible to pick it up. I'm guessing it'll be mapped on the standard satellite tracker things, or at least you'll be able to work out where it is and where you've got to point your aerial to. But looking at the picture of this, the one thing that did amuse me, it looks, assuming that the device in the picture that the girl is holding is the satellite itself, it reminds me very much of a Doctor Who alien, like a little spider-type creature. So, yeah, it looks all super cool. At the risk of being cheeky, well, it's not supposed to catch fire in space, so let's not put any of those batteries from that well-known smart manufacturer in there. I think we'll be fine.
Oh, that was close to the mark.
I didn't name them.
Oh, I know.
We all know who they are. I didn't name them.
Yeah. No. So, Chris, final words on this one. What do you think?
Well, I think it's excellent. I mean, it would have been great to get involved. You've got students here, young people that are getting involved in something which is, amazing. If you think about it, when I was at university or school doing it, I never imagined actually getting something in space, especially something like small but as powerful as this, something that's a little CubeSat which can go up there and orbit the Earth in low Earth orbit, and yeah, phenomenal work. And I think this is the second satellite that's. I think the first one was called Orisat. This one's Orisat 0. I think I'm right in saying that. Looking at the website, but yeah, it looks really excellent. I think it's going up early next year, isn't it? Looking at the website, but yeah, good luck. I'm sure it's going to. I'm sure it's going to meet its mission, which is to not set fire, as you were saying earlier, Frank.
Well, let's hope it does far more than not catch fire. Let's hope we do get some good pictures.
It looks pretty well engineered, looking at the photographs.
I'm sure it is. You wouldn't waste that sort of money just to send it up there to catch fire on purpose, would you? But yeah, that's so. Congratulations, guys. Keep up the good work and enjoy your coursework. I know the team here would have done if we'd have had the opportunity. Moving on to our next news story. No ham radio for the Golden Globe race of 2022. This is a race around the globe on sailing ships, I believe, and they've been told they're not allowed to use amateur radio. Frank, I'm going to get you go first again on this one because you made some good points when we were chatting about this earlier. What do you think, though, Frank?
Well, I think most of us who are hams, and certainly those of us on the podcast, we tend to defend amateur radio when we get inappropriately blamed. Like we've covered some RF interference, that got a lot of play in the media, but, we didn't really think it was the hams interference. It wasn't a logical way for that to be the case. At the same time, from an editorial perspective, I think we try to be balanced here. And here's a case of where you've got something outside of amateur radio, this sailing racing, the Golden Globe Race 2020. I wanted to see what the halftime show was, but I think those are other Golden Globes that are involved every year. They did something that some prepper groups, some other people do. They grabbed radios. These will let you talk a long way. We'll use them. And they were caught and they were told that's a no-no. In fact, it's illegal. So I think it's good for us just to lift this up, not to give a black eye to ham radio, but to promote the fact that ham radio is a lawfully provided service to us who have licenses. So kind of in the spirit of balance. Now, they do have, and the other presenters will talk about what it is they're going to use on HF, but it won't be amateur radio. So I think it's good for us to point this out.
Well, I think also they might have done well by contacting other amateurs, because if you've got a network of amateurs that can feed you information, that might make you have an advantage over somebody else. Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, I get why they're not allowing it. It's the ships involved are heritage. They don't have modern equipment, and I guess people don't want to be seen to be cheating by using radio to get any kind of advantage. So I get it. It looks like in the past there's been some noughties where people have used amateur radio and it's caused some issues. So to me, it sort of makes sense. I haven't really got any complaints.
Yeah, well, as I say, we have to, if you take part in a race like this, you've got to obey the organisers' rules. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, I saw it sort of banned because of unlicensed use. I mean, what really were they doing? Ban the people that were causing the problems. If you've got the license, personally, I don't see the issue with it. If you're being fed tactical information or something that might help you over something else, then I don't know how can you trust people to be honest and say, okay, you can have it, but if in case of an emergency or something like that, but you can't use it. I don't know how it's how it could be policed by that, but personally, I'd rather be safe and have it than not have it. I know that you can get, there are all sorts of VHF and HF services for marine and things, but I don't know this. If you're that far out at sea or whatever, I'd rather have as many options as possible, please.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Now, I'm going to throw one other one into the mix because I don't agree with people using amateur radio without a license. I don't condone that at all. I don't condone anybody breaking rules of a competition. I'm going to ask the question because I was thinking about this while we were talking about it. When we operate maritime mobile, if we're in international waters, out at sea, outside territorial waters, who's responsible? Is there a overall responsibility? I mean, okay, I hold a UK and a US call sign, but if I was to operate as Martin on the Jolly Roger out in the middle of the Atlantic, well, that's free space. Who
I think
controls
it's
that?
it's probably based on your home country as to whether or not you should or shouldn't be doing it. So wherever your license or the license that you are using, so if you're M1, then it's part of the UK rules. But bearing in mind there's an international marine broadcasting fence because it was all based on the early days of like Radio Caroline and the pirate ships that did used to anchor their ships in the international waters where technically they weren't doing anything wrong. 50 kilowatts or whatever it was might say different, but their transmitter was outside the rules. I think there is now an international agreement in force that means that your home country would probably be responsible for your actions and therefore should be the ones penalising you. It may have changed. It may not be global. It may just be a Europe thing or whatever to protect us from the pirates, but that's what I believe anyway.
All right, well that makes sense. And I've forgotten about the pirate ships out in the North Sea in the 70s. That was 60s and 70s. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just tailoring on to what Martin just commented on. It's my understanding that some countries enforce it and some countries don't. So, without naming and shaming, I'm aware of Pacific Rim country that once you get 11 miles out, they don't care anymore. Meanwhile, I know they care on the States, so it matters. But this whole story blows my mind because this is a single person in a yacht that's older than 1988 with limited technology. They specify what technology you're allowed to use for the run. They specify what, sail lengths and other parameters of the ship that you're allowed to go on. And this is a race around the world using the Southern Oceans. So in 2018, the record was Jean-Luc Van den Heedes sailed around the world in 211 days. that just blows my mind. So they're going to start on the 4th of September in France in 2022. Sail the Canary Islands, sail down the Trinidad, sail down the Cape Town, take some photos, sail to that southern point of Australia, Storm Bay, take some photos, sail out through the Pacific to me it looks like Point Nemo, which is nothing. There is nothing there, literally. And then get a photo at Cape Horn and then Punta de and then sail back to France, going up the coastline. It's mind-boggling that they do this ever so many years. And they will have maritime HF sideband radios, and they will have a weather fax for receiving weather charts. But I'm also wondering if there was other shenanigans going on there with they were using the ham radios to, get, like someone else said, get maybe some inside information. But it's all to simulate a 1968. It's all to recreate a 1968 race. Because only one man finished in 68, Robin Knox Johnson, and I guess he's gonna give her a try again in 2022. But in 2018, 18 boats started. 5 made it to the finish, and the rest, needed. Well, 3 of them needed rescue, but the rest did not finish the race. So it's a major commitment to enter this race, because it's mind-boggling to me that basically be at sea for 211 days or sailing around the world by yourself. So I wish them all luck, and it's a very fascinating story if anyone else comes up on it. It's the Golden Globe race of 2022. So keep your eyes open for that next fall.
Yeah. That's say it's an interesting thing, and I wonder how many of them have imaginary friends when they get back. But you on your own for that long, talking to yourself pretty much. But there you go. Interesting. We have to say that you have to obey the rules, and you shouldn't use amateur radio if you don't have a license. Because after all, we worked hard to get ours. Despite the jokes we had earlier, boys, I know you all worked hard to get yours. So let's move on. Okay, next news story. And the title was a bit strange. What's a long length of LAN cable? And a question mark, and it says, a transmitter, of course. Well, even I know it's not a transmitter. I might give them it's an aerial, but it's not, or an antenna. But interestingly enough, there's a guy here been sniffing the LAN cables to see what data he can get off it. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, so this is something that I previously aware of. I don't think it's a particularly new thing, but yes, I mean, as we know, any piece of wire that's got an electrical current going through it is going to be radiating something. And of course, even though it's very quick, you're going to have, with a LAN cable, you're going to have, things that are going to leak out of the cable, shall we say. So if you've got a way of receiving that, some sort of receiver that's probably quite close to the wire, then you can potentially listen into what's going on and sniff the network. And I'm aware, a colleague of mine in the company I work for, he's left now, but years ago he worked for on a government contract, and for this very reason, the entire network was fibre optic based, so that if someone did get physical access to the cable, they wouldn't be able to, essentially listen in, shall we say, so that leaking information, because obviously with fibre optic it's light based, so there's no RF leaking out of the cable. So I think this is it's interesting that it's been done. They've used SDR to do it, off the shelf kit, and it's an Israeli team from the Ben Gurion University. But yeah, interesting they've done it. I don't think it's a particularly new thing, but it's certainly something they've obviously done it new, and perhaps using some new techniques, SDR, etc. So yeah, and of course, IT and network technology is changing all the time. So when you're running gigabit sort of speed gigabit Ethernet, for example, that's a phenomenal number of ones and zeros going up that wire. So you need a pretty quick device to be able to decode that. So interesting.
Yeah, certainly is. And the more I think about it, the amount of LAN cable I got around this house, and I sort of bitch off about wireless technology for connecting devices, but the amount of LAN cable I got around this house, maybe I'm radiating just as much off that. Martin, I know that your new work location's got fibre, isn't it?
Sure has, and at the end of the day, I mean, you talk about the amount of radiation that stuff is going out. At least it's a dedicated cable to get the signal there in the first place. Where else it's going is different. I do wonder if you're using these stupid PLT devices, how much they're radiating. You must be able to decode that, because that is just, you're using not even a shielded cable or anything like that, or not even cables that are twisted together to carry the data. So how easy are they to listen to? And we know you can listen to them from quite a way ago. But yes, my new work location is now fed with fibre. I do have a Cat 6 cable that comes into here. I say Cat 6, Cat 5e. But based on the all the information I could find online, they don't run Cat 5 cable outside because it's too susceptible to lightning and stuff like that. Run yourself a fibre, which I've done. I've got a gigabit fibre link into my office here. The Cat 5 cable is nothing more. It's not connected at either end. It's nothing more than a backup. So if the media converter goes down and the fibre doesn't work, it's like 30 seconds to just switch it across and until I can get the thing repaired. But and that works very, very well. It's what I'm talking to you on at the moment. This story, though, does remind me of the TV series Bugs, which was in the late 1990s, and they were sniffing cables like this with questionable props. It's certainly worth watching. You can find it on YouTube and stuff like that. But it's a good laugh. And I, like you, I wrote, technically, the cable is an antenna. Transmitter is, of course, the NIC or the switch that's on the end of the cable. Reading it though, this can be read with using $30 off-the-shelf setup. And I sort of like, is this news? Surely I've heard of people doing this before, and jumping air gaps and things like that, because it's RF in the cable, isn't it? My curiosity makes me wonder how far a Cat5 or Cat6 cable or whatever would radiate. If you have them higher up, do they radiate further away? Or because they are twisted pairs and things, is the signal limited? Do you have to sit next to it? Can you just clip onto the cable, or can you be a discrete distance away? I don't know. I think if you're going after someone's signal, it's probably be easier to try and hack their Wi-Fi than get hold of a cable and do it. But yeah, no, it's interesting stuff nevertheless.
Yeah, I'd suggest, though, thinking about it further as we're discussing it, it would be very difficult to see how much you could get off a, say, a Cat5 cable or a Cat6 cable by sniffing it. And if you were trying to sniff it from any distance away, there'll be so many cables in so many households around where I live, because I live in a very, very built-up area, that I think it would just you'd struggle to make any sense of it. But it'd be interesting to sort of put a cable into a Faraday cage or whatever and measure what is coming off that cable specifically. That would
the other thing to bear in mind, though, is you bear in mind that for an antenna to radiate, you have to tune it. Otherwise, you get an SWR problem, and the power doesn't really radiate properly. Now, Cat5 cables, it doesn't matter how long the cable. I know you have limits to say how long it is, but would you find that I forget what frequencies the Ethernet cable runs at? Would you find that a cable that was the right length for the frequency would radiate the signal better than a cable that was too long or too short?
Probably. But there's all sorts of questions that it's generating an interest, and I'm trying to work it through. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Just in addition to what everyone else has said, I'm aware of a long time ago. Well, it seems like a long time ago now. Certain places I was at, they required them to use fiber optic networking so that no one could sniff data off of at that point in history, that would have been a 10 meg Ethernet network, or what was ArcNet, 2.5 or 2 meg network. So this has been floating around for a while. However, the interesting thing to me off the right off the article is the fact that this is now doable with $30 of off so SDR radio, and probably somebody has some software floating around the internet now to look this stuff up. But it's very interesting, and if I get some time in the cold of winter here, I'm definitely gonna take a crack at this and see what chaos I can cause by sniffing some UDP traffic. Anything that you see on these kind of exploits that seem difficult originally, or almost too difficult to believe, always as new techniques and technology rolls out, it gets easier. And then all of a sudden, the example I always used was, the amount of computing power we used to use to break wireless encryption keys for penetration testing. Now you can do it on a laptop. It's one of those things that's like, I don't want to talk about the rig we used to use. But I do encourage everyone that has any kind of interest in listening of computer networks and security related views to read this article. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, as you say, technology has moved on phenomenally. I mean, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had the $20, $30 SDR receivers. And I remember back in the mid-80s, when I was working for a company doing optical character recognition, and the scanner was about the size of a quite a large van. Had tape drives. The cabinets, the OCR cabinets were phenomenal in size, and all massive thing this was in the air-conditioned computer unit. Now you pretty much got a pen that you can wipe over something and it'll read it for you.
Let me guess. A bank check reader.
Oh, I worked on bank check readers as well, yeah. But no,
those were massive as well back in the day.
They were. You know, some of those were like, I don't know, nearly 30 meters long.
I was going to say about 30 yards long was the biggest one I worked on and scanned an obscene amount of checks into the mainframe.
Yeah. And I was talking about the scanner main one I used to work on was one that used to scan A4 documents. And that was huge. But anyway, we're going off at a tangent. So I'll tell you one day about my first inkjet printer, which was absolutely massive. Right, Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
I'll try to put it into kind of a larger perspective, sort of on the history of getting into this stuff, and I'll try to be brief. Interesting story. I agree with everything everyone has said. You know, early on when Wi-Fi was developed, there was this little hobby called war driving where people would ride around with a laptop and would see what access points they could find and was it password protected, and many were not. Why? Because, hey, I got it working. I'm going with it. So most of them were not, and you could see this in PC magazines. Put a password on your access point. So we went from war driving to one of the big security problems in many office buildings. It's less so today. And in the university setting like Bill, where he's at, this is probably something that's checked and it dealt with, you know, in the system for what ports are active. You want to break into a company, you fake some entry into it, applying for a job, you put on a work uniform, I'm coming in to fix the water cooler on floor 6, you know, whatever. And what you're doing is looking for open LAN ports, that is, plates on the wall that have Ethernet jacks. And when no one's looking, you pop a cable into it in your laptop and you see if you see anything. Are they using DHCP to give you an automatic IP address? Bingo. Then you do a scan. Then you begin to see what the infrastructure is. And kind of we've gone from that to more secure things. So now, what are we doing here? Looking at these cables, as I was listening to the comments, the issue with it is that so many physical plants for big systems vary. Where's the machine room? Well, they'll probably keep that secure, so every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Jane doesn't walk into the machine room. But that machine room might be built next to an exterior brick wall. And those cable races may be next to something that's a little bit of an attenuator, but not very much. And so some bloke outside on the sidewalk, if he or she knows that that's there, could probably listen from less than 2 feet away. Okay, got a lot of signals. How do you make sense out of them? Well, how does the network make sense out of it? Bill knows this. Chris knows this. Martin knows this. Through a packet header. So you can get all the noise, but if you know what to look for, you can then run all the packets. So it's a really interesting story about the evolution of security and what it means. And I'll end with this, one of my experiences. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Secretary of Agriculture, a cabinet level position in which I had NSA background checks to serve on his advisory committee. One of the things that we did was we advised on the census of agriculture. Our joke was we want to make it from the census of aggravation to farmers to the census of agriculture. And I visited the Jefferson, Indiana National Processing Center. Martin, it does a lot of scanning. Every federal survey that's of any sufficient magnitude, including the decennial census, including the monthly current population survey, including the economic census, and of course the census of agriculture, among others, goes to that place, they are scanned. They are scanned twice. Then they are compared. If there's a difference, they're scanned again. They were at as of about 2000, early 2000s, the single largest producer of bulk paper that was sold for burning after it had been shredded. They paid their electric bills. The federal government sold the questionnaires and the instruments because they've been shredded and put in bulk packages, and they were sold to a local company to burn to generate electricity. Who knew? But you know what their main security was? Because they were overseen by a committee in Congress, and this one thing made the person at the chair of that committee in Congress in Commerce happy, that center of all that data would be secure, was two old World War II Sherman tanks. And every half hour, a Sherman tank would make a lowly little slow path around that processing center inside the fence. And we were going to keep the bad guys out. We've got a Sherman tank protecting the store. So our definitions of what is secure varies by who's in power to determine what it is, as well as the technology. So interesting use of a hack RF unit or a little USB dongle.
Yeah, I agree with you, all of you guys. And when I worked in industry, in IT, often you could walk up to a user and say, "What's your password?" They tell you. They really do. If they don't shred their documents, the stuff that finds its way out into the rubbish is unbelievable.
I think that's yeah, okay. I mean, I think that might be the case then. I think there's a lot of companies spend a lot of time educating their employees about some of those things these days. But yeah,
I'm glad they have, Chris.
People factor is a very important one when it comes to security. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad they have. Anyway, moving to our next news story. This, when I saw it, I thought, well, it isn't really a news story, but there's so many interesting things about it. The BBC archive clip, there was a BBC TV archive clip of a 1949 ham radio contact. And it showed a gentleman who, at the time, lived not a million miles from where I live now. In fact, probably about 6 or 7 miles away from me, having a contact with another amateur in South Africa. But this South African was actually watching BBC television in South Africa with his aerial. So, Mr. Rothwell, would you like to go first on this one?
I'm going to say he's got dodgy sky, isn't he? No, I'm only kidding. It takes some time back, wasn't it? So he's receiving this from Alexandra Palace on 45 megahertz. Well, the first thing that springs to mind there, 45 megahertz. 6 meters or just below 6 meters. You go below or above. Depends which way you're counting. Just a little bit longer than 6 meters, which we all know, of course, as the magic band. Is it VHF? Is it HF? It has some real magical propagation things. It doesn't surprise me that this is possible. I'm guessing this could be maybe the BBC's first real experience of how propagation and things like that actually work. I remember there's a guy who used to live around the corner from me, actually. He's Silent Key now, but he used to have in his shack, he had a black and white band 1 television that could receive 45 megahertz and things like that. And he was often tuning her in to overseas channels, not because there was anything on it that he wanted to watch, just because he could. He was in a downstairs flat. He had a single telescopic antenna on the top of it, and he suddenly tuned it and like, we're getting some pictures on such and such a thing coming from the Netherlands or somewhere like that. I forget where exactly it was, but yeah, it's incredible what you can do. And I guess this is just an early example of like, oh my God, you can actually transmit pictures that far.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to know if there was a sunspot cycle peak that particular year. And I should have looked this up before I went come live with this. And I'm sure my colleagues are rushing quickly to check this out. But yeah, it's just outside our 6 meter band. And I remember back in the 1970s when I was a radio TV repair guy living near Crystal Palace. we used to have to go and fit capacitors across base emitter junctions of transistors in audio stages to stop them receiving the old 405 line VHF television signal, because the sound was actually AM. They sent AM sound with these old tellies. So, Frank, you rather like the fact the gentleman was in his working suit for the QSO.
I'm just enamored with the video, which is on Twitter, and Colin, I'm sure we'll put the link into it. I encourage our readers to watch this from over here on this side of the pond, and the image of the BBC during that era, that formality of radio with a suit, the formal work stuff there. And hams today would be saying, holy crap, we've got TV to South Africa, but the formality of it, I just was enamored by. And even today, when you think about all that we do, that's just an amazing transmission and reception. And it was apparently fairly routine at the time. So it's a story that you have to sort of see the video to fully appreciate it. But I encourage our listeners to watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, certainly was. And the interesting one was, I know when I first come into the hobby, somebody who wasn't licensed could send a one greetings message to another person who was licensed. As long as you held the mic in front of them, they could send a greetings message. But it looks like, from the licensing, in 1949, you couldn't even do that. So you've got the nice BBC man sit in front of this amateur radio station, and he can't really take part, apart from looking in total awe of what was going on. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I think as Frank was saying, I think I love the suits, love the ties, love the very very clipped accents they've got. It's I also love the equipment as well. They've got some really cool old, well, not old at the time, but old to us now equipment. But great. Obviously, given the frequency and the distance, I guess there were some particular conditions they managed to catch on the day when the guy was there with the no doubt massive film crew to capture it. But no, really interesting to go look back and see that from what's that now, 70 odd years ago. So yeah, interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, as I say, it was. I just thought it was a nice video, and there were lots of things about it that were once you look at it, and it generates things like, obviously he wasn't able to send a greetings message. It was on 45 megs, which I'm guessing, and I should have looked this up again before we came up. Maybe 6 meters wasn't available in the UK back then. I don't think we got it in the UK until a lot later, maybe in the mid-70s, I think. But I could be totally wrong on that one, guys. I'm sure the email's going to go ballistic. Bill, last words on this one?
Yeah, I didn't look up the 6 meter band one either, but I did look up the solar cycle quick. That was solar cycle 18. The peak was May of 1947, so that would have been 2 years after. It's, still probably good propagation. The next solar cycle started April of 1954. So, that's kind of halfway. So there was some propagation in there. So it kind of checks out. But likewise, it also checks out in my mind with Martin's comment about being the magic band. I think that had a lot to do with it as well. Also, just to throw this out there, because I just saw this, solar cycle 19 is the one that the folks have told me was amazing when they were kids. March of 1958, the smooth maximum ISN number was 285. Yeah, the bands were open, kids. No wonder they were always making contacts worldwide on 10 meters on 1 watt novice transmitters. So yeah, that was pretty good when I looked that up. Now the one that I'm familiar with was I wasn't licensed yet, but I was blown away by 1989 Solar Cycle 22. Same thing. You would turn on the radio, shortwave listen to try to get some code practice in, and signals would be overlapping on 10 meters because it was open 24 hours a day worldwide there for a little bit, it felt like. So we're hoping that the next cycle here that just started is going to be a winner again.
I think I hear a rumor, Bill, that 11 meters might have been open like that, but I wouldn't know anything about that.
I believe I've heard that rumor as well, but I was not paying attention back then.
How big was your burner?
I used to talk to a guy whose handle was Hangover Wolf in Medellin, Colombia, every day at noon. Every day. He invited me to his wedding. I wasn't able to go. I was a teenager, but it was every day. It was like a cell phone call today.
Yep.
Yeah, when it's good, it's good. And I often explain to people that amateur radio is like fishing. Some days you throw your rod in and you line in and you catch nothing. Other days you can't stop reeling them in. And that's the beauty of the hobby in some ways. And even when you think the band's dead, sometimes it isn't. So there you go. Right, move to our last news story. And I kind of put this one in because it shows what good value us amateurs really get. License fees for the 412 megahertz spectrum. Now, this is Ofcom in the UK are selling off a megahertz at a time, and they want £396,000 per year for it. You heard right, £396,000 per megahertz per year. I think our license is pretty good, don't you, Martin?
Yeah, I was just looking at this. £396,000 per megahertz now. And you think, okay, what do I get for that? Besides just being able to use the frequencies, okay, you're going to get some protection. If someone does start interfering, you probably have the right to go to Ofcom and scream. If you're a broadcaster, one frequency like 106.2 or something like that, I forget what it is. It's it's hundreds of thousands of pounds for that for the year. Admittedly, you're running however many kilowatts or whatever, but it's a hell of a lot of money. So it doesn't surprise me that it's this much. Initially, my initial thoughts were, who's going to pay for this to run alongside, as coexist in this space with Airwave? Airwave, by the way, for those outside the UK, is the push-to-talk radio systems based on Tetra that is powering our emergency services at the moment. So being interested to see who wants to use and pay for this spectrum. My initial thoughts were it's almost certainly going to be something to do with like mobile phones and things like that, because they keep saying there's not enough space for them. Doing a bit of maths, based on this cost alone, the 2 megahertz we get at 2 meters, 792,000. 70 SEMs, the 10 meg we get there, 3.96 million. 23 SEMs, 23, assuming it's 1240 to 1300, 23.7 million, although the RSGB website says 23 SEMs is actually 1240 to 1325, which works out at 33.66 million. If you add those up alone, that's 38.412 million, not including all the other microwave bands and the HF bands and everything else that you get in between. Yes, it's absolute value for money, and I would suggest the best thing to do here, if you're worried about this, we know what spectrum costs. Use this stuff, or one day they're going to go, we can get some money if we sell off these frequencies. You can't have that band anymore, amateur, because we're not making any money out of you. Therefore, we're going to sell it to these people. So use it or risk losing it. That's what I say.
Yeah, interesting numbers, Martin. Interesting numbers on that one. That's frightening, isn't it? How much? Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, these are just phenomenally mind-boggling large numbers of large amounts of money, aren't they? And it's per year. It's not buying it. You're essentially renting it, aren't you? So I guess those companies have to make a return, don't they? Interesting how it's airwaves. So we've got one airwave, as Martin was saying, is a public service system for the UK, so it's publicly paid for. So essentially, you've got the emergency services paying for a service, who are paying a service provider to provide that solution, who are then paying another part of the government to use that bit of spectrum. It's almost like, well, that seems odd to me. You got one amount of public money paying for something that's then being collected by another part of the government. It just seems like a bit of a strange one to me, almost like wooden dollars, I suppose. But yeah, phenomenal amounts of money, and it does make us feel privileged that we have such a phenomenal amount of spectrum to ourselves in the amateur world, and it's free. So we are privileged, and it just reminds us we should perhaps use it now and again just to make sure we don't lose it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Totally agree with you. Frank, I know it's this is UK, but and I'm sure you must have sort of similar things going on in the States. I'm just going to throw one extra one in that I had to renew my license in the States, W9ICQ, and it cost me nothing in the States. So both my licenses effectively are free.
Very good. Welcome to the U.S., Martin. The country's in chaos, but have a nice day. So I'm glad you're able to renew without a problem. Martin, some 10 years ago, I made the comment to somebody in the Atlanta Radio Club about our frequency allocations and how a lot of the stuff that may have been emerging some of it out of the maker world, but just R&D innovation around Georgia Tech over in Atlanta and elsewhere that was using RF. I said, one comeuppance of all this work that's going to be using RF spectrum, we're going to be vulnerable. And people in the room looked at me like I had three heads. Oh, no, sure. No way. Well, you kind of see what's happening. I made a similar comment that what's the big upshot from going up from 1200 BPS in a modem up to 2400 and higher. And I told the fellow department head, your faculty are going to want bigger hard drives. They didn't get the link. Well, you download faster, you're going to have more stuff, so need more space. And I think it's somewhat similar here as we have pressure on the need for RF spectrum. We typically, one solution to map all that out is with money. And that's certainly what the U.S. has done. Looks like what's happening over in your neck of the woods too. So we've already had some, Bill, correct me if I'm off, we had some 3 gigahertz that we're still fighting to keep, our ability to commingle with some other folks there, because we've got some MCOM digital stuff on. We've had the 400 megahertz spectrum we have. We're able to mingle with them, yet some areas where we have to back down because some have priority, and so on and so forth. So it's something we need to look out for, and there may simply be a bigger use for some of our bandwidth. And we often say we want to help the government during times of emergency. Well, sometime we may have to give up some bandwidth, whether we like it or not, to make way for some other things. I'm not advocating that. I'm saying that that's just a candid and sober acknowledgement. And this is an example of just how expensive, as Martin Rothwell put a pencil to it. What we have, if you put a pencil to it like this, is extremely valuable.
Yeah, it certainly is, Frank. Certainly is on that one. Bill, have you got any last comments on this one?
Yes, tailoring on to what Frank said. Yeah, there's some ardent, that's the amateur radio digital emergency network. There's some backbones on that 3 gig amateur radio band that they're going to have to move off once that action is done, and then we lose access to that band so they can use it for 5G. But I agree with everything else that people said. We do get amazing value, and we're supposed to be experimenting, guys. So keep experimenting, and keep using the bands so that we can justify that. Likewise, especially the people that are doing the maker stuff and building stuff. If you have a project that needs amateur radio for your RF base for your project, get some other people licensed. You get an amazing amount of access here in the States with a technician license. Amazing access. And as long as you're within the FCC rules, you can do a lot of amazingly creative things with your Arduino or Raspberry Pi project and some of these new boards. There's a lot of ISM band boards, but there's some that I've been reading on Hackaday because Frank started me reading that thing. Thanks, Frank. Anyway, there's things on there where they're actually taking a ISM band module and repurposing some of them for, that's been a while, but they were repurposing on an amateur band. And as long as you obey the FCC rules, you can use a little more power, definitely use better antennas, and get a little more range out of this stuff. So it's a lot of interesting experimentations going on there. But make sure people know, document it online, even if you're just sharing it on social media, because it will prove that we're using the bands. Because I think that if we actually did instead of just asking people to fill out a survey, this is one of Frank's points I want to hit on. If we actually surveyed everyone, all 770,000 U.S. amateur radio operators, and made them answer a survey as part of their renewal, I think we would find out a lot more people are doing a lot more things that we don't necessarily realize because they can with their license, and they just, it's a very niche part of the hobby, because this is an umbrella of, thousands of hobbies that just have a radio component that's shared.
Play your sound effects, Martin.
Yeah.
Which sound effect you want?
Any one you choose.
Not that one.
Yeah, not that one.
There we go. That one. Yeah. Why do we give this man a soundboard? Back to you, Martin.
Well, he paid for it, I think. So.
Yeah, he uses it in his day job, so I can't take it away from him, Bill.
I just happen. I've got loads of jingles loaded up for stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, but some of them are not broadcastable on this podcast.
Possibly not. And some of them are just too 90s and teasy to play.
Yeah, no probs. Well, that's all interesting. You guys are right. If we don't use it, we'll lose it. We have phenomenal access. And not only just with the fact that the amount of frequencies we have, if you think about it, if Mr. Sony or Mr. Philips wants to sell a radio in the UK, they have to get it type approved and all sorts of bits and pieces. And that's not just a transmitter, that's a receiver as well. If we want to build a transceiver or transmitter, once you've got your intermediate license, you're trusted to build a transmitter because you're seen as somebody who understands. Now, you don't have to have a university degree. This is where our hobby is has so many privileges, but it is about experimenting, as the guys have said. Right, let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time I spoke to them. I'm going to ask Bill to go first because I know he's getting close to his hard stop. So, Bill, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's hard, just about that hard stop time. Since the last time we talked, we had the results of the Portable Ops Challenge. I can't remember where I placed. I wasn't first, so I didn't care. How's that, Frank?
I'll give an update when it's my turn.
Okay. My strategy failed me. However, I did slightly better in the Pennsylvania QSO party 2 weekends ago. Yeah, 2 weekends ago. I had a wedding on Saturday. My nephew got married. It was great. So I got to work an hour at the in-laws picnic table in the dark. So I worked 10 stations on 80 meters. And that log doesn't count this year because you're only allowed to submit one log this year. So my Sunday morning log from Montour County, I worked 24 stations. So that's the one I submitted for score. And then we've had a beautiful, and I do mean beautiful, run with some DXpeditions on, I know, FT4 and FT8, but I'm very happy to be able to have worked these stations while they were on the air. So I was able to get S9 OK, J5 HKT, not Tay. It's been a long day. I just worked an Algerian station yesterday on 15 meters. And that was the other part of the thing I was going to say is most of these were on 12, 15, 17 meters. So the bands are starting to wake up, guys. Get on the air. Work some stations. Lots of fun stuff going out there.
Well, you certainly sound so you've been having fun, Bill. So that's the good thing.
I forgot one last thing.
Go on.
I left myself a note and I just put my finger on it. I bought a new digital interface for my KX3. I bought an object called a DigiRig, DIGIRIG, and it's digirig.net. It is an incredibly tiny audio and rig control interface for a whole grocery list of radios, including like things like the Zygoos and the Yaesu 817, 818, and KX3. So it has two little jacks on it, one for audio, the other jack on it's for cat control. And the thing I noticed right off the bat is of all the USB sound cards I've used in the last 20 years, this one has amazing sensitivity to the point of normally I turn the volume up on the sound card to 80% to 100%, depending on the card quality, to get enough audio to try to pull out the weak signals. This thing I'm running on the Raspberry Pi at 40%. So I don't overdrive the audio going into the sound card. Very, very good interface. Still building cables. I have a mishmash here of cables that I just tacked together. I'm going to build myself something nice and get it all prepped so I have it for my soda bag. So I will be able to, when I go out doing soda or POTA, maybe I can do some FT8. So this is kind of exciting. Very light, very small device. And I'll probably talk more about it later.
Sounds good, Bill. Sounds good. And sounds like you've got a winner of one there. I'll have to look that one up. Frank, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, just continuing some other stuff. Been testing a DR1X fusion repeater. It's on a tower near a small town of Pelahatchie, Mississippi. We have a lot of Native American names for towns here. It's on a broadcast tower at a 400-foot level, and it's putting out about 70 watts. It's getting back to me about 30 miles away. And I live in an HOA, and I have a vent antenna, one of these little antenna sleeves that fits over a pipe that's a exhaust pipe for a bathroom or some other room in your house. And so it's not a great outside antenna, but I'm on a bluff at a certain height, so it does well for me. It's getting 10 out of 10 on the FTM 400DR, so it's giving a full return back. So kind of pleased with that. It'll be linked into our WiresX room once our testing's done. And I did my first POTA activation with my team on Saturday, October the 9th. I have a 4-person portable ops team, as I mention them sometimes. And it was on something called the Natchez Trace. Now, the Natchez Trace is an historical roadway that was a set of footpaths that were created by Native Americans who lived in the areas, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, and others. But it runs from Natchez, Mississippi, the place that's often featured with the old paddle boats and gambling and stuff on the Mississippi River, all the way to Nashville, Tennessee. So it's a long federal roadway. And if you imagine back in the early 1800s, people that traveled them, they could go by foot, by horse, by carriage eventually, and things like that. I mean, what do they do? Where do they stay? Well, they were kind of holiday inns of sorts. That's a popular hotel chain here in the States that actually was founded in Memphis, just north of us. These things were called stands, STANDS, and they were like little Holiday Inns. And the largest one, founded by a man named Turner Brasher, called Brasher's Stand, is only about 1.5 miles from my house. So the four of us in my portable ops team, N5DU, K5XU, N5WDG, and myself, we activated the Natchez Trace there at Brasher's Stand. We used 3 infed wire antennas that I had built that I mentioned the last time I was on the podcast. We made 58 contacts in 3 hours on CW sideband and FT8. Most of them were in the U.S., CONUS U.S., but we also hit Alaska, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, and Sardinia. That was on FT8. They were nice catches, and we enjoyed that. So after we shut down at noon, we came back to my house. We had some fried catfish, French fries, onion rings, pickles, and apple pie or brownie a la mode. Sorry you guys couldn't make it. Maybe next time. We had a great time. It's just one of those times of fellowship with our fellow hams that it reminds you why you enjoy this so much. And I have a blog post at k4fmh.com called Brasher's Stands if you're interested in the details. One note is I was able to use my new ICOM 705 for the first time during that POTA event on 10 watts with an external battery. As our friend of the show and donor Scott Wright, K0MD, as well as Thomas Witherspoon, K4SWL, had both told me it's a very nice machine and I'd be very impressed with it, and I certainly was. Now, I personally only had one sideband contact, but it was from Mississippi to Arizona, and he assured me I had a true 599 report. He was a gent working the Arizona QSO party. And as Bill mentioned, I've been finishing up the awards in the Portable Ops Challenge. The awards all went to our distance champion for last year, Jack Hefner, NG2E in Virginia. He ran 1 watt and made a CW contact in Europe with over 6,000 kilometers per watt, and took the distance championship. He had over 600,000 points in just over a half of an hour, and he kind of put the rest of us to shame. Now, my team finished 6th. Bill, operating as a single operator, single station, finished 13th. He had about 25,000 and change. We had about 39,000 and change. Carolyn Eve Murray, who was a visitor to our show one episode, had a couple of thousand points and certainly placed there. However, our good friend and pal, Edmund Spicer, was afraid of becoming labeled a contester, so he didn't participate. I hope he will in the future if it's offered. However, Ed Durant, DD5LP, finished 4th in the country and one among those who are affiliated with the ICQ podcast. So send Ed some congratulations. Now, we'll mention that our sponsors, Howell Sound and MFJ Enterprises, have already sent Jack Hefner some nice packages of stuff for his next CW portable operation. Those who are ardent listeners might remember last year that when he won the distance championship, he emailed me and said he yelled upstairs to his wife, "Hey, honey, I just won a major contesting award." Her response was, "Yeah, well, it better not be a leg lamp." So I was on Amazon and I ran across this shirt that had this picture of a leg lamp, and beside it, it had a major award. Now, why on earth anybody would make that T-shirt for sale? But I sent him one as a gag, and because of that. So Jack had a really nice showing and had a really nice time. So trying to stay out of trouble, Martin, occasionally succeeding.
I think you're staying out of trouble because I'm not baiting you and getting you into trouble, Frank. Like Martin gets me into trouble, I've not been getting you into trouble recently, Frank. So you're okay.
Well, you're behind.
I am. I'm failing miserably, Frank. I'll have to have a word with Mrs. B to sort of start my engine again. Hi. Mr. Rothwell, Martin, what have you been up to?
He needs another cup of coffee. That will make him get you in trouble, Frank.
He does.
Him full of coffee, and you know he's a bad influence. That's all I'm going to say. So yeah, for me, I've actually not done as much in the last month or so because we've got a lot of DIY going on at home. So stuff sort of all over the place. radios have kind of been dismantled and sort of piled up in a corner and reconnected, and they're sort of there, and I'm playing with them a little bit, but just having a small child and doing DIY, it's taking up a lot of my time, as you would expect. Been playing with the talk group a little bit, some nice contacts on there through all three modes, which is quite nice. My HF antenna's still down. A while back, I had to take the antenna down, or at least one leg of it down, to have some trees cut back. And ironically, it's all coiled up and just stuffed in the bottom of the tree that is the sort of the middle support. And it still tunes up okay, which is a bit strange, but I'm reluctant to put any serious power through it until the antenna's back up. But I need to get some more the nylon rope type stuff you hook it up with and get that back up as soon as I can, really, especially as the weather is coming in at the moment. I can hear it on the roof here. It's absolutely peeing down with rain outside. And other than that, I've been working on putting my Pi-Star hotspot in a case. Most people think like it's a little 3D printed case. No, I've got a slightly more powerful Pi-Star hotspot that I'm putting in a little metal box with the power supply and everything. Doesn't quite fit in its exact form, but a little bit of cutting at the box should be able to mount it all nicely. So yeah, that's what I've been working on.
Yeah, sounds interesting. And yeah, as I say, I have worked a couple of times on the talk group, so that's good. Chris, what have you been up to apart from going to a wedding?
Well, I was going to say, same day as Bill, I also went to a wedding Saturday as well, although it was quite a distance away, so I had no chance to operate that day. In fact, to be honest with you, I've done very little operating at all since the last episode. I've done a tiny bit of HF. I've had a couple of contacts on HF on, I think, on 40 meters. Of course, now it's dark in the evenings. It tends to be that my aerial tends to work best on, I guess, I think only 20 meters it radiates the best on. So it gets quite noisy on particularly on 80 meters. So it just identify the winter months is when it's a bit quieter for me on HF because it's just doesn't quite work so well, shall we say. But we had our AGM for the club a couple of weeks ago, and we've now decided, we agreed that we're going to continue with online meetings. So we used to, every month we have a meeting every month essentially at the club where we have a talk. In fact, Martin, I know you're doing a talk for us tomorrow night, so I'm sure you'll touch on that when you come to talk about what you're up to. And we're going to continue to do that online. But we've tended to find we've got far more people joining our meetings via Zoom than ever came along in person. Got far easier, well, not far easier, but it's people have to travel as far to be able to do talks for us. So we've got a wider range of people we can choose from, including some people that are on the podcast tonight. And when the weather's horrible like it is, as Martin Mothers was saying, you haven't got to go out, you haven't got to get in the car, you haven't got to make the effort to actually go and go out to a venue and spend time in the rain or in the dark or in the cold. So for me, there's a lot of pluses to doing online meetings. There are some negatives. It's not quite as social. You can't have a chat with your mates, but we have a monthly meeting with the talk. We also, however, have now resumed having our weekly meetings in person. So we have a more informal meeting every week at a scout hall, and that's now resumed. So finally, after 19 months since the first lockdown in March 2020 here, we're finally having meetings in person again. So that's good. We also had our 75th anniversary of the club a few weeks ago. I don't think I've been on the podcast since then. So we actually met up. The very first meeting of the Sutton and Cheam Radio Society was in Yoldy Red Lion pub in Cheam, and we met up on the 75th anniversary in the same room, we believe, at the same time as that very first meeting. We actually had the minutes book there was taken on that very first day, so that was quite interesting. We had quite a few folks turn up for that, which was great. So yeah, that's not a lot of operating, but a little bit of club activity there. So there you go. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you have fun, and I missed the 75th anniversary dinner. Unfortunately, I was on a late shift that week, and coming back from 40 miles away, I wouldn't have made it in time. So that was the downside. All right, what have I been up to? Well, last weekend was JOTA, and Saturday we helped out with the JOTA with 7th Baptist Scouts at the Scout Hall where we meet up on a Monday night. I invited young Edmund up, Edmund Spicer. He came up, and he's a bit of a dark horse, really, Chris and Martin, because I didn't know he did Morse. So he ended up sitting there doing Morse with the children. Now, I don't think he thoroughly enjoyed it, and I apologise, Edmund, that you put your head above the parapet and said you did Morse, and I think you were the only competent Morse person there. But it was fun. You seem to be enjoying yourself with the children, and he does rattle the Morse quite well, guys. Did a bit of radio programming for a guy, one of our long-term hams that had a problem with his radio, so I programmed that over the weekend. But interestingly enough, on the front of the power supply, there was a what looked like a rotary pot, and above it had VOL space ADG. Now I thought, hang on a minute, you can't have a volume control on a power supply. It was actually voltage adjust, and they've written it as VOL adjust. So I asked Mrs. B, I said, what do you think that is? And she said, well, it's a volume control, isn't it? Everybody knows that's a volume control. Well, actually, it's not, because it's on a power supply. But it just goes to show how badly it was labelled. And this radio didn't want to program properly at 12 volts, or just on 12 volts. When I cranked the voltage up to 13.8, the programming lead seemed to work much, much better. Did have my kitchen roof recovered a couple of weeks ago. I might have told you about that. Started putting antennas up. My disc cone, which I use for listening, the whip had come out the top, and I thought it was a bird strike or something, and I'd deal with it. Unfortunately, when I got on the roof, I realised that it had literally fallen apart, this aerial. It hadn't been up there that long, the disc cone, but it had fallen apart. So that's come down. I did refit my HF antenna, and that's up now. And I refitted my 4-metre dipole, so that's up. So, Martin, I can work you on 4 as well, and certainly has some good contacts. Last Saturday, we had the First Icq Hub Meeting on the 16th, and it was for our listeners to come along and tell us what they've been up to. And we had a reasonable discussion for about an hour and a half. We talked about operating portably. We talked about different batteries and how they perform on one thing and another. And we talked a little bit about getting youth into the hobby. So it was a sort of general discussion. I think it went very well, and I certainly plan to do it again. So keep an eye out. You don't have to have a digital radio to join. We got young Colin on, M6BOY, and he was on via DroidStar. In fact, he was on DroidStar in a slightly different way, and I'm not going to spoil it because he's going to write a web page up for us on that, of how you can do that. I have operated HF 2 meters, 4 meters, and on the digital modes, which are UHF at home anyway. But HF seems to be quite lively. Like I said earlier, I've redone my license for the States, so I'm W9 ICQ for another 10 years, so I'm pleased about that. And last but not least, tomorrow night I'm doing a Zoom talk for Sutton and Cheam on the ICQ Podcast Digital Talk Group, which may or may not be of interest to people, but it's certainly something I've been working on with Adrian for a long time now, most of this year, and this is the first time we're going to talk about it in public. So that's what I've been up to. So I think we've all been pretty damn busy, and as I say, that's a good one. Right, all that's left for me to do is thank you all for joining me. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys. Nice to hear you all on again.
Yeah, great to have you, Chris. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, who hasn't managed to get me into trouble yet.
It's been fun.
Yeah, good one. And
I'll send you some coffee tomorrow.
All right, loads of coffee. I might even pop around and see you if that'll threaten you. And I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, and maybe I do need to get you naughty again, Frank.
Yeah, well, it can happen. It can definitely happen. But thank you for having me today, and it was good to hear everyone on.
It was great fun. It's great fun. Unfortunately, Bill had to leave us. He was on a tight schedule again, but he's left us. But he obviously sends his best regards to everybody. So all that's left for me to do now is say 73s, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73, guys.
See ya.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Hi, ICQ podcast listeners and ICQ podcast digital talk group users. As you know, we have had our network up and running for a good few months now, and we're now starting to try and do some other improvements to make it more reliable. To this, we're actually now putting our servers into a managed system online, and hopefully that will make it far more reliable for us. However, at this point in time, we do actually have parallel running between our old system and our new system. Hopefully you won't spot this, but if there are problems, you may wish to check out a few things first before you panic. Number one, make sure your Pi-Star software on your hotspots are up to date, because if it's pointing to somewhere where it doesn't exist anymore, then you may have a problem. Now, Pi-Star software tends to update every day if there's anything that needs updating, if your hotspots are on 24/7. If your hotspot is not on 24/7, then ideally you need to go into your configuration on your hotspot, into the menu, and just run a manual update. Only takes a couple of minutes, but it's well worth doing that, and that could save you a hell of a lot of problems. So remember, if you're not using your hotspot for 24/7, make sure you do the updates pretty much every time you go in for the next few weeks. And even after that, if you're connecting to other things other than the ICQ podcast bridge, there will be other alterations happening within the Pi-Star software all the time. Now, other things we've done recently is that we've now got a page entry on the ICQ podcast digital talk group page that will give you the last 3 tweets that I tweet or Colin tweets to let you know if we have any problems. So if you suspect we have a problem that we know about, and we may not know about them, but if you spot something that you think we know about, go pop there and just see if there's any news, because if we, for argument's sake, take down one mode of operation for maintenance or whatever, we will put that information there. Now, the idea is to make this as painless as possible and to try and not give you frustration or disrupt you from using the system. Long term, we're hoping that this will improve the situation. We've had a couple of outages in the last month that we had no control over. So we're hoping that this will now solve some of those problems. I hope this helps, and I thank you for your support.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin, M6BOY. Start off with a couple of news stories here for you in this episode. We're starting off with the WSJT-X version software. Now that's just been updated to version 2.5.1 and has been made available for general availability. This release contains many improvements and repairs relating to Q65 and JT65 modes when used with non-standard and compound calls. New features also include microwave aircraft scatter and repairs for defects detected since the 2.50 release. So as always, we'll pop a link to how you can get the latest updates on the ICQ podcast webpage, and congratulations for the team for releasing a updated version of the software. Now, in the States, if you're thinking of becoming a ham or know someone who wishes to become a ham, good news that the AWL's YouTube channel, AWL HQ, has launched a series of amateur radio technician class license courses. The series of videos features Dave Kaesler, Kilo Echo Zero, Oscar Golf, and QST's Ask Dave columnists as he covers there and leads people through the AWL ham radio license manual. So say a great potential learning tool for people who are more, so we say, visually YouTube orientated. So they can check out those videos by the AWRL and find out, say, how to become a technician in a hobby. Right, now we head over to our features episode, and this episode we're looking at what the ARDC is doing to support the amateur radio hobby. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi, Dan, KB6NU here. Today we're going to talk about amateur radio digital communications, or ARDC. This isn't some new communications protocol like FT8. No, ARDC is a private foundation that's been making waves, pun intended, in the amateur radio world. Now, full disclosure, I was hired 4 months ago to be the ARDC communications manager. Even so, I think you'll find this to be an interesting topic. I'm joined today by Rosie Schechter, ARDC's executive director, Chelsea Paraga, ARDC's grant manager, and John Hayes, ARDC's outreach manager and chair of the Grants Advisory Committee. So, folks, why don't you tell me a little bit about ARDC? What's the mission and how does it fulfill that mission?
Thanks so much for having us, Dan. I'm so glad to be here. ARDC's mission, actually, I'm going to pull it up on the website and just read it because it is comprehensive and good. All right. The mission of Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC, is to support, promote, and enhance digital communication and broader communication science and technology to promote amateur radio, scientific research, experimentation, education, development, open access, and innovation in information and communication technology. And, so at the very least, I think what folks should take away is, a core part of our mission is to support amateur radio through and through 100%. And there is a part of our mission that actually extends beyond, supporting amateur radio and helping broader communication science, information science, that kind of thing. And we fulfill our mission in two primary ways. One way is through the 44net address space. We, and I'll let John Hayes talk a little bit more about the history of this space in just a second. But we have this giant address block of address space that has been allocated for amateur radio usage. And so part of our role is to manage the allocations of that space, make sure that it's all being used legally and properly, all of that kind of good stuff. Back in 2019, the board of directors at the time, actually nobody on this call, but the board of directors at the time made a decision to sell a quarter of the address space for the purpose of creating an endowment that allows us to make grants. So since 2019, we have been making grants to, support amateur radio and digital communications. And I'll let Chelsea talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So yeah, that's amateur radio, digital communications, ARDC. That's who we are. John, talk a little bit more about the history, 44net. You've been involved for a long time.
Yeah. So what happened is in the relative early days of packet radio, there was interest in doing true networking over the packet radio networks. And there were some different protocols that were put forth. But there was this beautiful stack of protocols called TCP/IP that was emerging in the broader internet at the time. And there was addresses available for various companies and research institutions and so on. Anyway, one of our forward-looking hams, Hank Magnuski, who is currently on our grants advisory committee, got a hold of John Postel and said, can we set apart some addresses for amateur radio use? And in those days, networks were classified as A, B, and C. And an A network had 16 million IPv4 addresses. And going clear down to C, you got down to 256 addresses. Well, 16 million addresses were reserved for amateur radio. And over the years, the trustees for that network have gone down through several iterations until finally ARDC's founder created a corporation to be the holder of that just in case one of those trustees was no longer available. Unfortunately, Brian was the trustee that no longer was available. About the same time as we had the opportunity to sell off some of those addresses. And we sold off a quarter of them. So 4 million addresses, which put together a very nice endowment for ARDC. And the stock market has been very good to us since then. So it's grown some. And the grant side is what Chelsea will talk about in a moment. I'd just like to highlight some of the work that's being done on 44net right now.
And by the way, that's also known as AmperNet, right?
Correct.
Yeah, some folks might know it as AmperNet.
Yes. Thanks, Stan. So a lot of the way that people have used it for the first couple decades was creating tunnels through the internet using a protocol called IP to take one or a handful of IP addresses and make them available to everyone else that was using the tunnels. And that creates a very giant matrix spiderwebby kind of thing of endpoints that are talking to each other. And it takes a lot of maintenance to keep those routes up and documented. We do that through a portal, portal.amper.org. And so the other big use of them has been in building microwave networks that are using amateur allocated microwave space and basically running the same type of hardware you would for a wireless ISP to handle traffic in the 44net space. We are working on, and it's still in the research phase, the idea of creating a series of points of presence around the world and allowing people to VPN in that to get connected to the overall network on Net 44, as well as gatewaying out to the rest of the internet. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more information in the coming months as that solidifies more, but that's what we've been doing.
So we still have 12 million IP addresses. Correct. I guess that's still enough for amateur radio use.
Yes. And we have IPv6 coming on the horizon, which will give us an almost infinite number of IP addresses for certain types of applications.
Yeah, totally. I think that one of our biggest, one of the challenges that we have right now is, how do we make sure that we use all of this space, and how do we make sure that we use it, effectively? So, we are thinking about allocation. We are thinking about, how we might be able to provide, IP addresses to different organizations, amateur radio organizations around the country and around the world. So, if you have an idea for it, get in touch with us, contact@ardc.net.
Yeah. I'll just add that one of the other things that we're working as part of this bigger project is we'd like to get it to be as easy to get on to Net 44 as it is using a digital voice hotspot. Basically, a little device you drop in, the Ethernet or Wi-Fi port on that would make available 44net addresses for you to use in your ham shack. And make it super simple to do. Basically, just put in your your login information, and it takes care of the rest.
Cool. So Chelsea, do you want to talk about the grant side of things and how it works?
Yeah, so currently we are making grants in 3 major categories. For the support and growth of amateur radio is the first one, but also for education and technical innovation. So your project can be amateur radio related, but it also could be related more broadly to digital communications, communication science and technology. Really, if you have an idea that you think aligns with our mission, please reach out to us and we can talk to you about if it's a good fit or not. The main things you're going to want to know about our grant application process is that we try and make it as easy and accessible as possible. So if this is your first time ever, thinking about applying for a grant, if your club has a need, go on our website, ampr.org, and you can click around and see, what it takes to apply. But in short, what it's going to be is just a description of what you'd like to do and why you'd like to do it. We ask for budget and things like that, but we're also available to help you through that process. You can always give us a call or an email, and we can talk through, how to come up with and refine your idea, all the way up to, reading a draft of your proposal before it goes to our review committee to make sure that it'll be successful, or at least so that we can give you advice and give you some good odds there.
We really want you to be successful.
Yes, we want to be partners with you in this work. And because of that, so far, about 80% of people who apply to us are successful in getting a grant. That doesn't mean that, we just take everything and anything. It means more if you apply, we're going to work with you to get towards something that meets our mutual goals. A lot of what we say no to is things that kind of miss the mark for us on our mission, like projects for broadcast radio, or something if we have concerns that it might not be successful. Our grants advisory committee is made up of a whole bunch of technical experts, including John Hayes. Everyone is a ham. So they're going to know what you're talking about, and they are going to review your project and the type of equipment you're asking for to make sure that you're going to be able to carry out the work. After our grants advisory committee reviews your application, it then goes to our board with a recommendation for approval or not. The board takes the final vote on that. And if it's successful, then we issue the funds to you. In the follow-up, we again try and make reporting successful. So if you were to get funds from us, all that would be expected typically is that every 6 months, we're going to have a really quick check and just talk about how your project is going. The purpose of that is so that we can help you out if you have any needs or if you've run into any obstacles. And at the end of the project, we have a written report where you can share information with us that we can take back to the public. Maybe have some fun photos we can share. Maybe there are some challenges you ran into that we can tell other clubs about so that they don't run into the same types of problems. Again, overall, ampr.org, that's where you're going to find all this information. And you can reach out to me and John anytime, and we'll talk through your project with you. And in fact, we've approved some really cool things recently. John, do you want to talk about those?
We can talk about a couple of them, but I know you have some more on your list. So one that we've done recently is, the big one that a lot of people have seen is we provided funds to save a radome and antenna at MIT campus. We made a grant to the MIT Radio Club of $1.6 million to preserve this piece of equipment that has been repurposed from its original purpose of weather studies using radar to various amateur radio pursuits. And that was a pretty exciting one for us. We were able to turn it around very quickly. We also have funded some development of some networks. The HamWAN network in Oregon. There's a repeater network in Colorado and New Mexico, and some others. You have a couple more there, Chelsea?
Well, we're doing international now too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
We're hoping to get more international grant applications.
yeah, we'd love to see more international applications.
Yeah.
And by the way, the process of that, because of U.S. tax law, we tend to make our grants through 501c3s, educational institutions, and so on. That's pretty straightforward in the U.S. In the international space, we have to do a process called Equivalency Determination. Basically, and Chelsea can give you more of the details on it, but basically it's a process that determines if the sponsoring organization for the project is equivalent to those entities that we just talked about in the US, and we actually pay for that process to go through. So it's not something that you have to put into the burden to get a grant. Chelsea?
Totally. I mean, there is some paperwork that they have to do. So I would say that that's the only burden, but I don't think we've heard any complaints from anybody just yet. So knocking on particle board.
Yeah, if you're thinking about eligibility in general, it's really easy for us to give money to 501c3 charitable nonprofit groups that are located in the US. It's fairly easy for us to give money to charitable and nonprofit education schools, anything located outside of the US. It just takes a few more steps. If you are a for-profit company or your club is like an LLC or has no status at all and it's just a group of volunteers, there are still ways for us to work with you. It just might take a little bit more time or may ask you to partner with a nonprofit or with a school who can accept the funds on your behalf. Again, that can sound, a little bit intimidating. Just reach out to us and we'll talk you through exactly what you need to do for your specific situation. Can
you give us an example of a grant we've given to just a regular old amateur radio club?
Yeah, I was going to say actually one that I really like. I think one of the universities, we gave a grant for them to have loaner radios so that students could become licensed. And then instead of having to invest a ton of money to get a really nice setup, they could take out these radios on loan for the semester, make contacts. There were different program aspects there where they would have mentorship and some learning opportunities, some demonstrations for them to see so that they can really use the full capabilities of those radios. And the point of that was to, expand interest in the club and also just give these kids those opportunities.
About how much was that grant for?
That one was for $8,000 about.
Okay, so the clubs don't need to have a multi-million-dollar grant proposal. They can still request more modest sums for more modest projects.
Exactly. We funded everything from $2,000 projects to the $1.5 million projects. And, all kinds of organizations can apply. And we've actually seen a lot of clubs work with their local middle and high schools as well to do after-school programs, demonstrations with satellite contacts or emergency communications, or even just, fun things where they're able to solder some chips together and do some different things like that.
Oh, tell me about one of those.
Well, one of my favorites, actually, well, they're all my favorite. I don't have favorites. We got a great application from Woodridge Middle School, where a teacher there took the kids out on a fox hunting experiment where they were able to, build some antennas and go around and locate a little beacon out there. So the kids learned about radio waves and frequency, and they tied it into their science lessons for the year. And the teacher afterwards was saying that, he thinks that the students were a lot more engaged in these ideas that otherwise are a little bit abstract and hard to see how they apply to you as a middle school student.
Well, that's very cool. So I think we're also big on scholarships.
Yes. So we have awarded several scholarships through the ARRL, through the Foundation for Amateur Radio, and we're also working specifically with universities. So if you have a university in your area that has maybe an electrical engineering program, maybe something really specific that is amateur radio or digital communications adjacent, then that's fantastic. We're also just trying to give scholarships to help get more diverse people involved in these fields. So anything that we can do to support women, people of color, we want to make all of these fantastic learning opportunities available to everyone, and we completely understand that there are barriers and challenges for those groups that we'd like to help them overcome.
Totally.
Yeah, our aspirational goals definitely include diversity, underrepresented groups, women, so on. Chelsea, maybe you could share the recent grant we gave to the Society of Women Engineers.
Yeah, so the Society of Women Engineers is a great partner that we're super excited to be working with, in part because they're going to help us make some scholarships internationally, and targeting that towards people who want to get into engineering that we wouldn't necessarily know where to find them or where to start. So they're going to be doing that. But in addition, they're going to be looking at creating pipelines of success. So they're doing a study on women of color in community colleges and seeing what barriers there are to them becoming engineers, and seeing what supports that they can offer to help more of those women become engineers at the end of their education. And so we're hoping to learn a lot from that and fund more projects that take on those techniques. The final aspect of their work is actually providing mentorship and some supports to women in college who are just graduating and entering the engineering field. So that can be a huge time of change and challenges and feeling, just overwhelmed. So connecting these people with mentorship and resources and support so that they know who to turn to when they have questions is hopefully going to help a lot of those women stay in the field.
Yeah, and they're reaching in both directions on that. One of their other programs, it goes down into the secondary education area, high schools, middle schools, and so on, to help young women understand the opportunities that they could have in the field and encourage them to get into the field. Part of their studies also is, where are the fallout points, because we know they exist, and why, and what can we do to mitigate the fallout on that pipeline that Chelsea was talking about earlier.
Yeah. And I have to say, I am so excited about this set of scholarships. Like I'm not known for having a poker face, and I definitely don't have a poker face about this. I'm just so excited. And I would also say to anybody, if you are working at a historically Black college and university that has an awesome engineering department, if you are a part of or know of a project that is comprised of women, people of color, LGBTQ+, we want to hear about it and we want to help. Amateur radio digital communication science in the US is predominantly male and predominantly white. And obviously we're going to support everybody within this field. And at the same time, we want to do whatever we can to help increase diversity and to support underrepresented groups. So yeah, if you have ideas, leads, send them our way, giving@ardc.net.
Okay, so how about some technical innovation grants?
You want me to take that one, Chelsea?
Oh yeah, I'm going to scroll through, but I think you can stab at it.
Tell them about M17.
That's the one I was going to do. So those of you that are not familiar with it, M17 is a project to create a digital voice, not just standard, but the whole implementation of a digital voice radio ecosystem for comparable to like D-Star or DMR or Yaesu System Fusion, but have all of it be open source. And they're using the codec 2 that was developed by David in Australia as the voice encoder, the vocoder for that. and they're building up a prototype radio system for that. And we were able to fund further work. When you're building hardware in particular, you need a lot of test equipment and that type of thing to test out what you're building. You even need a soldering station to solder the parts on. And we were able to fund them to, Chelsea, was it $250,000 on that?
I think around that.
Yeah. And our partners at the Open Research Institute are helping manage that, since the development group is not specifically a formal 501c3. It's actually got international components to it, and ORI has been a fiscal sponsor for them, and which has been very helpful.
Yeah, I found out about M17 even before we gave them a grant, and I was very excited about that project. And I think our grant is just going to help that project really make some big strides.
Absolutely.
How about some of our satellite or space grants, space science grants? Didn't we just do one for a group in India?
Yes, we did. So that is going to be the 1U Cubesat project. John, do you know about this one? What would be a good way to describe it?
So this is a nonprofit in India that is running the project in partnership with some others. Basically, it's the research and development to create a 1U satellite. The platforms for low Earth orbit satellites are measured in U's, and you can have a 1U, a 2U, a 3U, and they are building that and working with some other institutions in order to get it into orbit. And it's a good learning opportunity for the people that are in the project, with a global reach because of the satellite.
Well, it seems to me like we're really just covering the whole field here. Just it's exciting to me too. Every time I come across one of these grants, I'm thinking, how cool is it to be able to support this kind of work?
And as I recall, that particular one, they're also implementing LoRa as a communications medium to that satellite. And there's a lot of growing interest in LoRa in the ham space. It's interesting. They contacted us because they were concerned about the bands that were being used being amateur radio. It turns out that the LoRa is actually a proprietary development, but it's commodity equipment you can get. But the target bands for it are ISM bands that we happen to share in 70 centimeters and in 33 centimeters. And then in some parts of the world, they also use the 868 megahertz range, I believe. So we were all good because everything they were doing would fit into what we were doing as amateur radio and help amateur radio as well.
And actually, now that you bring that up, I don't think we've really discussed this, but all of our grants, we expect the results to be open source, correct?
Correct.
And that's both hardware and
I think
hardware and software.
As much as possible. I think that the one caveat that I'd throw in there is that if we give a scholarship to a student and a student is doing work at a university, like we don't have any control over that, right? But at the same time, like anything that someone's working on, we do want it to be made as publicly available, open source, all that kind of good stuff as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great way to put it. Well, any other things you folks might want to add?
Well, I got a couple things.
Go for it.
Sweet. So I would say that, so we're getting towards the end of 2021, going into 2022. So there's a couple things that folks should note if you're thinking about applying for a grant. Oh, and I don't know when this is going to come out. This might come out after. Anyway, so this might come out after November 5th, just so that folks are aware. We're looking to do some end of year administrative stuff from about mid-November into the early next year. So if you get your grant proposal in after November 5th, 2021, we'll look at it in 2022. Like, go ahead and send it in. Like, don't wait for it or whatever. But at the same, just note that there'll be a little bit of a pause for the holidays. I have to say, the staff, this is the first year that ARDC has ever had a staff. And our tiny staff, most of whom is here, has been kicking butt all year. And so, I want to give them some time off for the holidays too. So we'll see. Anyway, so yeah, get your grant proposals in by November 5th if you can. And if not, we will look at it in early January. The other thing that we're going to be doing in the next few months is at the end of the year, we evaluate our existing technical advisory committee and grants advisory committee members. So if you are interested in potentially applying for one of those for 2022, send us some information about yourself, contact@ardc.net. Some things that we're definitely looking for, we are looking to increase representation, both from racial and, gender perspective. So we're women, people of color, we invite you to apply. Additionally, for our grants advisory committee, this year we've had primarily folks who are specialized in amateur radio. If you're somebody who works in digital communication science, we are also really, really interested in working with you and having you on our grants advisory committee and providing that level of expertise. So again, send in your information if you're interested in being on either our grants advisory committee or a technical advisory committee. Contact@ardc.net. And I think that's it.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Thanks to all of you for joining me. It's as I always say, I'm just really excited to be working with this group, and I think we're going to do a lot of great things for amateur radio and digital communications.
Yeah.
So 7-3, and please get in touch with us if you have some good ideas.
Agreed.
Again, that's for grants. It's giving@ampr.org. For general communication, it's contact@amper.org.
Or, well, we have to, we're trying to phase out amper.org. So it can also go giving@ardc.net or contact@ardc.net for general inquiries.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. And Dan, thank you so much for putting this together. You're a delight. This was fun. Let's do it again.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. 7-3, guys.
7-3.
The ICQ Podcast. Getting it said for amateur radio.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed this episode's feature, finding out about how the ARDC will be supporting amateur radio going forward. So, as I say, guys, if you know of anything that you might need the help for, reach out to the guys, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help. Right, now feedback from you very kind listeners now coming up, and we had our first ever ICQ Digital Hub online net meeting event, get together, friends chatting away event, call it whatever you want to call it. And we've got a mail in from Winston, KD2 Whisker Lima Lima. He said, thanks for setting up the Digital Hub call. I enjoyed the call, although could only stay on for the hour. I hadn't used the HT I connected with in a while, or DMR for that matter, as I was trying to get my HF DIC 705 set up on the air. So I wasn't sure if you hear me or not. Tried to answer a question and was talking for about 20 seconds, and then I forgot to let go of the PTT, realised someone else was talking, so didn't try again. But it was great to have you on, Winston, for that there, and we will certainly be doing that event again. And so you can get involved on the Digital Hub by joining in, and there's many ways of joining in, as we demonstrate on the ICQ Podcast webpage. The other way of doing it as well is using the hose line if you just want to be a listener to the group and find out what's going on. You don't yet have the kit. And Don, Whiskey Bravo 3 Charlie Echo Hotel, was one of those that just drops the line and let us know that he was able to listen in quite happily. using the hose line, and the link for that's again on the ICQ podcast web pages, and that was working well. So thanks for the feedback to Don and Winston for dropping us down their feedback, and thanks for everybody joining that event. And we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves, Dad, didn't we?
Yeah, certainly did, Colin. It was a great one, and okay, not too many people turned up for the first one. Maybe people thought we weren't being serious, but there was sufficient people. We learnt from it. We'll improve it. We'll make it better next time. And I'm looking forward to it. And I know everybody that joined were really pleased and wants us to do it again. So we will.
I heard the quality of people were really good. That's what I heard. And there was even an M6 boy on there as well, which is a rarity for some people. But as I say, they could have got me in your call book if you were on that call. But there we go. We're planning we're trying to work out a date for the next one. And as soon as we've got that one in the bag, we'll let everybody know. Now, Don, Kilo 4, Echo Alpha Echo drops line, said we mentioned in the previous show a bike ride supported by hands, but didn't mention the ride itself. Now, it's KK4 Echo Charlie Romeo is doing the MS Bike Ride Tour to the Shore, and that's taking place on the weekend that we release, and it's taking place from Point Vidra, I think it's pronounced, in Florida, to Dayton Beach. So thanks, Don, for filling in that extra information. Now, though, we'll be released on the second day of that event. So I'd say if that piques your interest and you can certainly help out in any way, I'd say check them out there and let them know for there. So thanks, Don, for adding that bit of extra information for us. Really do appreciate that from there. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up this show, episode number 362 for you. As always, we'd like to thank our monthly and annual subscription donors for helping us pay our way and, as they keep our costs ticking along nicely out on the internet. If you would like to show your value you received from today's shows and the activities the ICQ podcast do, it's a great, easy way of doing it. All you do is you go to icqpodcast.com/donate. Think of the value you found from the show, turn it into a monetary value, and send it our way. So if it's the value of a cup of coffee, think what that costs you in your coffee house. From what I knew it was this morning, it's €3 is the current price for a cup of coffee. And say if that's what it is, pop it away, or a theatre ticket, or whatever it be. And I say a great way of showing your appreciation for the show and what we do. So I say we do thanks for everyone that's set up their subscription donations. And as I say, there's a great way of getting involved and helping us out along the way. As always, we'd like to thank the guys who joined the News Roundtable. So that's Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo for joining us there on the News Roundtable. Thanks a lot, guys, for being involved. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up this episode today. So I say I hope everyone enjoys it there. And as always, though, we have one very important task to do at this important time, which is obviously make our dear ladies a cup of tea. And in your case, find Mum a chocolate biscuit as well.
Yeah, certainly have, Colin. Well, I've got two ladies to make a cup of tea for, because I've got your mum and your sister's here, your sister Wendy. So most people didn't realise you had one. But yeah, they're both here. I'm going to make them a nice cup of tea, find them a chocolate biscuit, and then with a bit of luck while they're nattering, disappear to the shack. Hi. So have a good one, Colin.
No, we'll do. 73s all, and we'll catch you all in a fortnight's time. Look after us all, 73s.
73.